Do you get nervous at all, Remi?
I try not to think too hard.
Yeah.
That's, like, I do
Yep.
like, yeah, I just let it go. It's like, well, it's whatever's going to happen is going to happen.
Yeah.
That's my
I try and
motivational quote for the day.
I try and pretend that it's just us talking and no one else is ever listening.
Yeah, that's the key, really.
Hey, what's happening, you guys? Welcome to the Proclivity Podcast. We're here to deliver to you simple and effective nutritional and lifestyle techniques that you can apply directly to your life. Nothing too wild here. And today we have a very special guest that is going to be coming on, and we're going to be talking about nutrition. Not just nutrition, but endurance nutrition specifically for hunters and outdoor enthusiasts, the ones who go out into the wilderness. How can we prepare to be able to be out in the field for as long as we need to? Is there certain ways that we can eat and prepare just like we do for our hunts physically? Is there a way that we can prepare our bodies with our nutrition to be able to get the most out of our hunts or being in the backcountry? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Yet before I bring on our guest, I want to tell you a little bit about him. Remi Warren is a very well-known outdoor TV personality, hunter, podcaster, writer, and incredible guide. His talents are vast and many. He is a field editor for Western Hunter magazine, host of his own podcast, Live Wild Podcast, co-host on the TV show Solo Hunter, where he does all of it himself. He's literally out there hunting, and he's carrying all his equipment and recording himself. It's an incredible show. If you haven't seen it, check it out. He's also the host of Apex Predator. This is a TV show that explored the uniqueness of animals in nature and how it translates to humans. I mean, this guy is expansive. You can also find him on various different social media podcast platforms. And he is a reoccurring, not just once, but twice on the Joe Rogan podcast. If you've never heard of the Joe Rogan podcast, well, then you're probably not here to listen to our podcast. You're probably not listening to the podcast in general. So without further ado, we want to welcome to the show, Remi.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Appreciate the intro, and looking forward to just having a conversation today.
Yep, that's what we're doing. That's what we talked about before the show started. We all get a little nervous before a podcast starts, and we all just decide that it's just us having a conversation. Mm-hmm. So that's how we're going to do it today. So, Emily, let's have a conversation.
Let's do it.
Go for it. You hit it first.
Okay, Remi. Well, we're going to open up with a couple opening questions. And Joel is really excited to hear. He wants to hear the story. He called it the Disney story of you saving your wife's life.
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that summarized version?
Yeah, I'll give you just kind of the highlights, because it's a pretty deep and long story. But, I've it's one of those stories, too. You've just got to invest a lot of emotional capacity to it because, it's very meaningful to me. But, yeah, I actually, my wife at the time, there was a period we had dated and then we weren't dating, but I wanted to get back together with her, and she ended up getting lost in the Nevada wilderness. And long story short, I saved her life and found her. It was I got a call from her sister that I actually just got back from filming a TV show in Alaska. And I think I was up there for a month or so. And the day I got back, I got off the airplane and got a call from her sister. And I was like, I haven't talked to her in a while. And answered, she's like, Danielle's missing. And they're just trying to figure things out. So I just immediately dropped my stuff off at my house and headed out to where she was and met up with some of the search and rescue guys there. And a few of the guys kind of knew what I did. And I mean, my entire adult life has been spent finding things that are hard to find. It's what I'm really good at. And thankfully I was able to translate that skill into finding her in the middle of the night. and in some ways it's one of those stories too, where it's just like, I don't know. I mean, we were pretty. She'd been missing for I think going on 3 days in the summer, or yeah, I guess it was June. And yeah, I kind of went in there with the thought of what everyone had done already wasn't working. The Black Hawk helicopter gave up its search. There'd been crews in there and dogs in there and other things, but I took it of the philosophy of if they hadn't found her yet, then whatever they were doing wasn't right. So I went in with like completely fresh eyes. They were telling us, this is what we're thinking and this, and I just had to ignore all that and kind of go in with that mindset of I'm gonna do this my way. And thankfully, like Danielle and I had hiked around all over the place many times, and I knew that she wasn't afraid to go off trail. So that was my first inclination, was to kind of go off trail. And I picked a canyon and went up in the dark. And yeah, I remember walking in there and literally praying, like, give me a sign, God, that she's here. And I was doing that and like saw some scuff marks. Wasn't sure if they wasn't, because it was pretty dry, so it could have been deer, it could have been anything. But started following those to this bench and just got this weird feeling, and ended up getting distracted from that spot. But just had this feeling of like this spot feels like, I don't know, it just, there's something about it. Went back in there and ended up finding her there, and it was pretty crazy. So yeah, it's kind of a little bit of a romantic love story, but it's very fitting for us as well too. I think just to kind of it was, I don't know, it was cool to be able to be the one that saved her.
Oh,
Dude,
yeah. Round of applause to you.
Yeah, there's something about the Warren boys. When they know what they want, they go get it.
For sure, yeah.
Like ain't nothing to stop them.
No.
And there's a few things, right, in what we do here that really struck a chord for me. One of the things that we help people do is get in tune with their body. But the body knows best is a saying we have. And that gut feeling, like, man, it's here, to be able to follow your senses, your gut feeling. That's something that nobody else, because they didn't have that connection, could possibly do. It was all tactics and all up in the mind, where you went completely into the heart and the gut and went, no, this is where I'm gonna go. I feel this is the direction, which is rad, man.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So it's just something you think about a lot too when you're doing things, and you, especially, I've spent a lot of time in wilderness situations and outside in the mountains, and there's a lot of times where I'm by myself, or there's many times where I've spent close to a month or more, maybe, like coming back and resupplying or whatever, but like in mountains of New Zealand or somewhere where it's fairly dangerous mountains, and you kind of have to rely on those instincts and intuition, because there's no safety net. There's nobody to help you if something goes wrong. You just kind of have to, you really learn to trust those instincts. And over the years, like it's definitely paid off for me. And one of the things that you learn when you're by yourself in the wild for a prolonged period of time, there's no one else to talk to. So you really have to dig deep and learn like that voice inside of you, what that's saying, and maybe where that's coming from, and listening to it. I think in our modern culture, we kind of get distracted by so many other things that we forget to listen to ourselves. And that's one of the things that's the hardest thing to teach people, as you guys probably know, is people, when we talk about fitness and nutrition, and I know we wanted to talk a little bit about backcountry nutrition, and the first thing that I could have to tell people, if they say like, what do I bring on a 10-day backpack trip? And I'm like, well, first, what's your body like? Like, because what I need and what Joel needs and what Emily needs are three completely different things. And
100%.
I know what makes my body run. And I found it out over the years of like trying different stuff, mostly. But listening to your body and saying like, this is when my body performs really well. I need these certain things. Everybody's different. I talked to a friend a while ago. Is like he calls himself like a former fat guy, right? And what the former fat guy needs for food is different than a guy that's always on the go and always energetic and always athletic. And and for different people. So really trusting what your body says is the first step in learning a lot of things, as you guys know.
Oh man, dude. I knew this was a match in heaven, Emily. Already starting off exactly what we're talking about. One of the things, Remi, that we tell people to do in our program is 45-minute walks out in nature. No cell phones, no kids, no, just literally by themselves. And dude, how hard that is for people. Like to eat a meal with no distractions. I mean, I'm sure you've ate plenty of meals with no electronics and nothing else out in the wilderness. That's a different feel than being surrounded by all your kids and family and there's things going on and so on and so forth. Having that reflection time of getting to know self, I would say, and tell me if I'm wrong here, really honed in those skills of listening to yourself, your body, your intuition, call it your spider senses, or so on and so forth, right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. It's, you get, when you're real comfortable with yourself and you kind of have none of the other distractions, it's a lot easier to trust the things that the instincts and the things that come up that you think, oh, maybe I should try this. Maybe I should try that. There's certain things where you like, I mean, how many times do we go out through our day and we don't drink any water because we're so busy? And when you're like, when you don't have that noise and that clutter and that you sense that you're thirsty. Yeah. Oh man, I'm sweating a lot. I'm thirsty. Oh, how many times when you're out there and you're like, you do something physically exertion, you crave that like electrolyte mix and your body's just telling you, this is like, your body knows what it needs to survive. It's just like most people can't hear their body talking to them or their whatever talking to them. It's not a real audible, loud cry of like all the other things around us. So we get distracted by those things. And a lot of times the things that we really need that are necessities, we can figure out. I say this to people that maybe don't understand hunting as well. In our human DNA there's so many things, and survival and hunting is very foundational in our DNA. We got to this point somehow. Now we have grocery stores and factory farming and agriculture and thousands of ways to get food in us and through us. But we got here by being hunter gatherers originally. And so when I take new hunters out, they're like, they don't know anything about hunting yet. There's this experience that they go through where they're like, it feels very familiar and very natural. And it's very weird to explain to people that don't hunt because you're tapping into this primal thing in your DNA of humans need to know these things to continue to exist, or in some stage did. Now you can probably just get by without it, obviously, but your body is designed to survive, and you have these fight or flight instincts. You have all kinds of humans have so many crazy things that we probably don't even notice that we can do that are just innate in us, and maybe you just can't hear it through a lot of the noise, or haven't trained yourself to, or put yourself in situations where you need to tap into those instincts or knowledge or listening to yourself.
Emily, I'm very curious in your thoughts on that in itself, in terms of what Remi's talking about and people's connection to, the food and the noise. What's your experience with that?
Well, I was going to say, first thing, if you're having trouble tapping into your body, right, whether it be being aware of what your body needs, go hunting, go on a hike even, right? But if you have any friends who are hunters, right, I polled some people like, hey, what would you want to ask Remi Warren? And some people are like, well, where do I even start? I don't know anyone who hunts, but I would love to try it. So find someone, reach out, or start with some hikes and looking up some Remi videos. But that, you're so right. It's such a great way to become in tune with your body because there are way less distractions and you're in nature, and there's so many benefits to it, right? You're moving your body, you're getting oxygen flow to your brain, your senses are alive. And that just literally helps you. It's like meditation, right? Helps you get in tune with your body. So to me, it's like, that was a light bulb moment for me of like, oh, why don't we just go on hikes more often or try hunting even? If you're new to it. Try it out. See if that helps you become more in tune with your own body.
Oh
Yeah.
man.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's, I think that there's that portion of self-reliance in anything that when you have to rely on yourself can kind of lead the way. And that's a very, interesting feeling. And I think a lot of people don't get that feeling. And it's not that you just kind of have to go out and start doing those things where you aren't necessarily reliant on all the other things around. It's a good way to get in tune with your surroundings and really yourself. Um, I think that's, there's a lot of good things about that. And there's so many people that, all you have to do is just start. It's not that hard. Like there's you being in Northern Nevada, there's more public lands and wild spaces. If you're in somewhere else, Texas or back east, New York City, it's very hard to get away. But if you live in a place where you can escape for a little bit and get out, and you may not even have to be by yourself, but to get out in nature and just start like doing these things, it's a good way to start developing that mindset at least.
Man,
Oh yeah.
totally agree. And you hit something, the B word that Emily and I we don't allow our clients to say, which is busy, right? We use the acronym of busy as buried under Satan's yoke, right? He's trying to keep us distracted and focused on the external and all the other things we can do instead of being able to focus on ourselves, our relationship with God. And what you're talking about in terms of these innate, ingrained, humanistic DNA kind of reactions is that we are going to have sympathetic or parasympathetic reactions throughout the day. Where when we used to be in the wild, our only sympathetic reaction was, do I have a true external threat coming at me? Is there a predator chasing me down? And do I need to raise into the sympathetic state? But now with all these different external distractions with work and everything else, and we have the comfort of, oh, there's a house over our head and we have running water and I can go to the store and I know I can get food, that the body still is going, wait, well, where's the threat though? So we start finding threats in work or our relationships or even sports teams. And we start getting into these really frantic modes that's really detrimental to our health. And again, being able to get outside and be able to reconnect with nature and the most base layer of who we are, which is hunters and gatherers. We had to survive. Before all of this, we had to survive. We had to go out and we had to feed ourselves. And that's the most humanistic type of feeling I think anybody can have, is being able to hunt and gather for your own food.
Yeah, and it gives you confidence, right? So if you're lacking the self-awareness, if you're lacking the confidence, when you take those external factors out, you have to build that confidence yourself. So another benefit.
Yeah, definitely. Like that being able to rely on yourself, or, maybe even you're in a situation where other people are relying on you. I've been a wilderness guide for, I think over 20 years now. And, the thing that I loved about it when I first started, I was 18 years old and I would take out millionaires into the wild, and their lives were like literally in my hands because they were so incapable of really just basic survival and like navigation. And it's like, if I just walked away, you're dead, dude, but the thing about it is it gave like, it was just this interesting thing where here's a 18-year-old kid in the mountains of Montana, and this person that is probably their entire life been the person that other people are relying on, that's pretty tough on people, that whatever, is completely reliant on what I've learned over the course of my adolescent youth growing up doing these things. And that gave me a kind of confidence, not like, oh, I'm better than anyone, but it just gave me a very self-reliant confidence that like all that other stuff didn't really matter, because when they're out here, they've got nothing in so many ways. I think it's, doing things like that, things that are hard, things that are, I've got a buddy of mine that we talk about this stuff all the time, of just as far as, you know, mental toughness and how far mental toughness goes in the factor of progressing all areas of your life. People that are mentally tough can do a lot of things that other people can't. And the trouble is most people don't understand that to be mentally tough, you have to train to be mentally tough. There's certain things that you have to do that you learn to overcome. And over the years, I've been in many situations that are extremely difficult, possible, well, life threatening, and kind of come out the other side. And I can take that into every single avenue of my life. So if it's something where, Joel, somebody comes to you and they're like, I want to get in better shape. And you're like, cool, let's do it. And it starts to get hard. They quit because they've never trained that muscle to be mentally tough. They just don't know what it is. If it's like, hey, I want to eat better. And there are people right now that the doctor has told them, you need to change your lifestyle. You got to quit drinking. You got to quit smoking, or you're going to die. And they die because they don't want to go through the hard yards, as I like to call it, because they haven't done things in their life that are hard. And that's the cool thing about, I don't know, being outside, being in those environments where you have to be self-reliant, where you have to, like, if you're going to get out of here, you're going to have to hike yourself out. You have to do something hard. And that really turns something on in your brain that allows you to do so many other things in life that are hard and kind of conquer them in a way that makes it not necessarily easy, but it makes it doable and sustainable for people that maybe aren't used to that.
Damn, you're hitting it on the head. We love this stuff. So good. So Remi, I mean, I love that you're talking about in terms of that mental toughness. And I love that you brought up that point for people who are like, literally, you're going to die. You're 42 years old. You have hypertension, right? You're already showing signs of heart disease. You need to do something. Yet let's bring it back to hunting, and let's bring it back to getting into the backcountry. If somebody's sitting there right now and they're listening and they're going, well, man, I mean, this guy knows what he's talking about. How would they get started? Like, I mean, you know it best. What would be the baby steps for people who want to start hunting to get started? Is it, going and getting the right hiking shoes? Is it starting to walk outside? Is it, getting a guide? Is it going to the, gun shop? What is it?
Yeah, that's kind of always the hard part, is like there are a lot of barriers to entry, especially when it comes to hunting. When it comes to hiking and getting outside, there's not as many barriers, but there is if you aren't familiar with it. The easiest way I would say is to kind of find a mentor, and that can be very difficult to do. I think, like, my suggestion to people that have asked this question before has always been, one thing that hunters, maybe people that don't hunt, don't understand is they're the leading funders and people that promote conservation. So the reason that we have certain species to this day was set up organizations through hunters. And there's a lot of conservation organizations that are hunter funded in Nevada. There's Nevada Bighorns Unlimited. There's national ones, Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, Wild Sheep Foundation, Ducks Unlimited. Every species of like potential game animal, there is an organization, and they have fundraisers. They have events where you can go out and build water catchments. You can reseed areas. There are all kinds of things. And that is a great place to meet hunters because they're out there doing the work. And if you're like, I want to get into hunting, I don't know how, join one of these organizations, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. They have even just like as easy as like a pint night or whatever. There's organizations where you can go and interact with other hunters that are doing things that they like to do. And generally the hunters that are doing those things are people that are very passionate about what they do. And they like sharing what they do with others. So that's a good way to kind of just maybe meet somebody if you don't know anyone. If you do know someone, ask them, be like, hey, I'm thinking about getting into this. Every year, I take a lot of people through guiding and through just, friends and whatever people that I meet hunting for the first time, or maybe they've gone once and kind of tried to figure it out. But having somebody show you something is hands down the easiest way to start off. We're in an age now where there's so much information, technology, and other things where you can also like get things that we couldn't get 10, 15 years ago. I mean, I've kind of like my entire professional career is dedicated to helping people understand things about hunting, giving tips and tactics and other stuff. Like when I started hunting, the things that I'm sharing on my podcast were not available to me. I learned them through many days in the field and a lot of hard work. And now I'm just like, here, have it for free, you know. But that's out there. There's apps. There's there's mapping software on your phone that shows you where you're allowed to be. There's so many resources out there, videos, courses. There's just so much of that like you can actually gain a lot of knowledge from that. When I was growing up, I knew no one that duck hunted, and I really wanted to do that. And I knew no one that bow hunted, and I really wanted to do that. I learned both those things on my own, and I learned them through originally reading a book and then just going and trying to talk to people. That didn't work out, and then just a lot of trial and error. And that's always an option as well for the people that are really in it. I know I've got a lot of friends that have done it. Like they've pretty much done it on their own, and it's through resources online, reading things. You know, it used to be books, it used to be magazines. Now it's podcasts. Now it's YouTube videos. Now it's masterclass type apps, stuff like that. So there's a lot of resources out there, and if you can find someone and dive into those resources and do the combo of the things, you're well on your way to at least getting a foot in the door.
Yeah. I find it so interesting because it's like, it seems that we have more resources than ever before, but people doing less. Does anybody else get that feeling?
Because there's too many options.
Yeah, you're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna be a barista today, and then tomorrow you're like, well, I'm gonna be a pit master because I'm gonna fix my car. I'm gonna do whatever. Like you can do it all.
Yeah, you can YouTube it and app it and so on and so forth. But I think that resistance, right, of being able to go, man, there has to be a lot of research done. I have to go to the library to be able to get the book, to go down to the, the local bar or whatever to be able to talk to somebody and be like, hey, do you hunt? Do you happen to duck hunt? Bow hunt? Like that takes a lot of effort and time. Yet with the resistance comes the building of the reward, and it's like these days everything's so quick that there's not much resistance, so there's not a huge reward. And I mean, that's similar to hunting. It's not like hunting's just like, I mean, maybe for some, drive up, pull out your gun, bang, throw it in the back of the truck, I'll be home for dinner, babe. Like there's a lot of resistance to it of, finding and harvesting and hiking out and quartering and all the things that makes it such a reward. Do you think that's one of the reasons why hunters can get so addicted to hunting itself?
Yeah, I think that there's that challenge aspect of it where it's kind of the funny thing when you are a hunter and like I've been hunting a lot of different places and you see people that are against hunting. They go, oh, it's so easy. You just go out and shoot an animal. I'm like, okay, come with me one day because it's not that easy. You look at like the success and it's like many places in general areas, it might be 5 to 10% of the people that go out are even successful. Half those people probably never even see something that they don't even realize like what actually goes into it. And I think when you get that, you look for that. It's kind of like that success reward, that carrot at the end of like, I put in a lot of hard work and I want to be successful. And it's more the trips that you aren't successful that drive that fuel that fire in many ways, that more addictive. Like there's a lot of people, there are people that just go out and hunt every once in a while, but most hunters it's like it becomes their lifestyle. Like, this is what I think about. This is because they want to be more successful. And they're like, I put in so much work. I hiked so many miles. I only found 5 chucker. Now I got to get a dog and learn to train a dog. And then I got to get better at shooting. And then they flush up and I missed 3 of them. Damn it. Like I just spent an entire season and that's like, it becomes in the struggle of it. And so, sure, there are instances where things are easier. There's certain things you can hunt that might be easier or whatever, but most real hunters kind of, really love that challenge. I think that's why you'll see there's people that rifle hunt and then there's people that go muzzleloader, hunting with a muzzleloader or a bow. It's like, well, why would you go bow hunting if the goal is to bring home food? It's like, well, there's this challenge aspect of it that you want that challenge too. You want to, you in many ways want the reward of doing something hard. And so you choose that intentionally. And that's just kind of like a weird mindset of people that do hunt that you may not think about, is they in some ways seek those challenges, and there is a very big reward when something's difficult. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be hunting, it could be anything, but if you do something that's hard, you're going to value it a lot more.
There's the quote of the day. That was the one. And Emily, was Remi talking about your husband?
Sounded like it with the chucker.
That's a lot of people. With chucker, that's a lot of people. That's been me many times.
So many times. All right, I want to pivot to talking about nutrition. That's what we do here at Proclivity, and I want to pivot because nutrition is essential when you're out in the backcountry, because you don't get to just go to the cupboard or the refrigerator and be like, oh, okay, this is what I need. And so I specifically want to dive in, and this is going to be a really open conversation, you guys, of two experts coming together, in Remi's experience of being out in the field and Emily's experience in terms of helping people with nutrition and specifically metabolic flexibility. And I'm just really curious on how we can help people train or prepare physically when it comes to their nutrition for their hunts. Because I've trained a lot of hunters in fitness programs, and they come back with really terrible stories. And then I start talking about nutrition. I'm like, well, duh. Like before you went out there and while you were out there, your nutrition was garbage. So your experience was garbage because you were needing to stop, every 15 minutes, or you felt dizzy every time you went to go get up to start walking again. That's going to make an experience really difficult to enjoy, when we can make it a lot more powerful and even more successful within the hunt if we have the ability to continue to move, continue to hunt and get the harvest. So, Emily, I want to start off with this. Lay the foundation of what we do here with metabolic flexibility for people who may be listening for the first time. What is metabolic flexibility?
Yeah, so metabolic flexibility this is more the sciencey side of it, right? It's our body's ability to use both carbohydrates and fat for fuel and be able to switch between the two really easily, right? So I'll give you a tangible example. So if you are someone who is hiking, right, for a couple of hours, even if it's just a hike, and all of a sudden you feel your energy totally drop, right? Usually that some people call that a bonk, some people call that low blood sugar, but that's your body's inability to tap into fat stores, right? It's relying mostly on carbohydrates and sugar. And so then when you eat a snack, you feel better, which is great, right? And so you can go about that way. You can pack the snacks with you and eat every couple of hours or when you feel that dip in energy, right? But another strategy, which we love to utilize, and Joel has actually utilized, he ran a 50K running
34
on
miles.
Only fats. Is that right?
Yeah. I didn't take any carbohydrates because all the runners were like, you have to do carbohydrates. And I was like, oh, really? All right, you weak ass minded runners. Why don't I do this with only fats? And sure did. Ran 34 miles.
So that's the other option, right? And as Remi said before, right? First and foremost, it's like do what you feel best with. But no, there's another option, right? Of being a little bit more metabolically flexible, being able to fast for periods of time and run more off fat for fuel when need be, right? So especially if it's like, I would imagine on a longer backcountry trip and you don't want to pack as much, right? Maybe you're packing a little bit more fat and in order to use that fat for fuel, this is what we do in the Proclivity method, is help you use that better, right? Because if you're metabolically inflexible and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm going to try this out, it's not going to work, right? You're going to still feel those bonks and those crashes. If you train your body to be more metabolically flexible, your body can more easily, just like training for exercise, it can much more easily use fat for fuel and not rely on just the carbohydrates. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. It makes a ton of sense. And so, Emily, how would that apply to the backcountry or to hunting? How would you say it?
Right. So, yeah. So what I mentioned, if you train for this, whether it be minimum couple of weeks, but ideally a couple of months, train your body to be able to fast for a little bit in the morning, skip breakfast and wait till lunch, do a fasted workout, or go hunting without food, right? And perhaps while doing any of those, adding electrolytes in, that's the definite key. But train your body, right? Couple days for weeks, for a couple months, and your body will eventually become more metabolically flexible through other things, right? Prioritizing protein, getting fats in for sure, because that is going to be your primary fuel source. And so, yeah, fasting a couple days a week, and that could look like a million different things. But a first great way to do that is push off a couple hours or skip breakfast and get a little exercise in there, whether it be walking, hiking, running, and see how your body does. So that's the first step.
Interesting. So, Remi, hearing that explanation of metabolic flexibility and what Emily was kind of talking about, what works for you when it comes to being able to stay energized? Because I've never hunted. I've been trying to get tags for 3 years now. I've gone out with friends before, and when you're hunting, there is this kind of steady zone 2. Then you might be climbing, you might be pushing into like a zone 4 or even zone 5, depending on how steep and how much weight you have on your backpack. How do you work what have you found is best for you when it comes to your nutrition?
Yeah, it just so like if we're talking about like a backcountry trip where you're taking everything on your backpack, and sometimes those, like I did one in BC last year. It was like 14 days or something like that. You are
Jeez.
carrying everything that you're going to have with you for those 2 weeks or whatever. And the trouble with that is you're always, no matter what you take, you're going to run at a calorie deficit. Like you can't physically, you're burning 6,000 calories a day or whatever, maybe more, maybe less, depends on the day, but you're carrying a heavy pack. You're going up steep mountains. You're probably in low or a high elevation with low oxygen levels, and your body's being taxed. And not to mention like there's a lot of other factors as well. Cold, things are just your body's being taxed. And so your body is running at a deficit, and you definitely feel the effects of that, or a lot of people do, and they start to slow down. They crash, they bonk. Being very flexible with the way that you utilize your food is very important. I used to be, and over the years, I've actually kind of changed my philosophies in many ways. Because I've found for everybody's a little bit different, and where you start out and where you end up is always two things. And sometimes you go back to something you used to try. You're always doing different things, and it kind of goes back to knowing your body. But once you know your body, you can get away with a lot more. You can push yourself harder. The one thing you don't want to put yourself in is a situation where you need rescued. So like you've got to be smart about things too. But I used to always joke that I was like a bear. I would hyperphage, which is where bears like they eat in the fall, they store up their fat, and then they go. So it's like before a big trip, I generally eat a lot. Like I'm putting on calories because I know that at the end of that trip, when I start to lose, when my body starts to essentially eat itself, it's taking away from something else. It's taking away from because the one thing you got to remember is when you're like a backcountry hunter, unlike other sports where you're running for a day. This is how many people run like it's like a marathon every day for 2 weeks. People do it, but it's like a prolonged. It's from sun up till dark. You're moving. Most people aren't used to that, and so your body's taxed in completely different ways. And it has to be. You have to get up the next day and do the same thing over and over and over. So you have to have your body needs to also be able to use what it has because you're going to be at a calorie deficit, and you also have to take in calories in a smart way. I believe that a nutritionist buddy of mine calls it front loading, and that's something that I was really bad at. I was always the don't eat and then go, and over the years I've switched to that front loading idea too, where I'm having carbs that I can access right away in those like more. I do not like eating in the morning, but like giving myself something to kick off my metabolism so I can start to burn the things that I'm taking in. And then have those stores as well for the times it's like, now I got to dig deep. Now I got to use what I've got, because you don't know the things that you're going to encounter. So I kind of, I've been both camps in different periods of my life and kind of found this middle ground that works really well for me and know what my body needs. I can go like you said, there's certain, I was talking about this with some friends a few weeks ago. Like I tried doing things without sugar, right? And my body is not good. I know that I burn certain sugars really well. Some people don't. Some people that's bad. Some people, and I don't know, as a nutritionist, I was like, maybe that's how my body just works well with it. So I make sure that I have certain things that work really well with my body, and then also have that ability to switch from those carbs, those sugars, those whatever, to fats and other things, because you never know what you need to pull on. And when you're carrying everything, there's certain things that don't keep, it's like real hard to bring certain proteins. You can get it from nuts, you can get it from dried meat, but you also have to realize like it's hard to anything. Like I'll bring, coconut oil and things like that to get those fats, to get just anything to getting extra calories is really, having calories is really good in the backcountry, just having access to them. And then having access to use what your body's stored. It's like, you've got to have both things really. And I think that's the other thing is, in many ways, people kind of underestimate the strain that your body's going to go on. And what happens is people go 3-4 days and then they start to crash, and it can put them in. I've been in situations where people have put themselves in bad scenarios. My brother and I took a film crew into Alaska one year, and everybody said that they were good in the backcountry. They had all this experience, and it was like me and Jason pretty much carried a dude out of, and it was like, instead of being back at dark, we were back at 5 a.m. And it just put everybody in a bad situation. So there are those things where you really have to pay attention to your body, but also, like you said, Emily, training. People decide to try this stuff. Like they're like, I'm going to go on a backpack hunt. And so they read online that they need peanut butter and they need this and they need that. And their body's like, it could be like Joel, where it's like, my body burns fat better, and that's what I need. And they didn't bring any fat, or they didn't bring, or they're completely changing their diet for this experience where they don't have access to anything else. And that is the easiest way to get yourself into a bad situation, to crash, to not, in what I call like practice, to not know how your body reacts. I know my body works really well without eating, and that's fine. And I do really good. A lot of people don't, but I've had a different, like a lifestyle where I do that hyperphage, and then I go and do something really hard for a prolonged period of time, and I'm in a calorie deficit for 2 weeks, and I do fine, and I'm good from beginning to end. But that's just with a lot of experience in many cases.
And what it sounds like, though, Remi, is that you are metabolically flexible. Whenever someone is able to go on for prolonged periods of time without food, that's a key sign that you're like, no, I'm metabolically flexible. My body is able to switch and be fine. And like you said, some people are going to definitely have more trouble getting into that, but it takes practice. So, and it sounds like too, you're like, I don't like to eat in the morning. So I would assume when you're not hunting, do you eat breakfast first thing in the morning? Typically?
I do now,
or would you not?
But I
you do now?
used to never eat breakfast. Yeah.
Right. And I would assume that actually helped you get your body more metabolically flexible. So when you are hunting and you do have those prolonged periods without eating, it actually helped be like, no, I can do this. I've been here before.
Yeah, I would think like most of my life up until this point, I probably just started eating at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. If I didn't eat in the morning, you just go all day. And then it's like, okay, cool. Let's eat.
So you're fasting, right? Yep.
Not intentionally. This is like way prior to anybody saying anything about fast. But just like, I just don't eat in the morning and I get hungry when I'm hungry. Okay. And then I just, and then if I knew I was going out, I'm like, I'm just going to eat. Just eat every meal. Just go. Just hyperfit.
Yeah.
Pack it on.
Right. Well, and that
burn it off.
And it makes total sense. Like that's exactly what I would do, especially with those prolonged high intensity trips. Because then you're like giving yourself superpowers that your body's not used to. You're like, oh, carbs, great. So it makes perfect sense in what you do. And so again, like I look back at like, what do you do day to day? And you practice fasting intermittently. It sounds like here and there you used to. And so your body's trained to do that. So again, when when you're eating the carbs, you're like, whoo, this is awesome. Like it gives you extra energy, but then you can also easily switch to, oh, if I'm like at the end of the hunt, still haven't found an animal, we have a few more days, then your body's easily able to go in that calorie deficit too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Well, and I'd even say that's the reason you were able to pull that cameraman out, is because you had your body literally, yes, you have the, I know your brother as well, and you guys both have some incredibly strong mindsets of just grind, go, 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 go. And I believe both of you guys are metabolically flexible. And to have that capacity to be able to do that where other people couldn't is due to the fact that, and I'm sure your brother's pretty similar in terms of his eating habits. Emily,
Yeah.
would you know?
Oh, I've heard very similar of like he didn't eat all day, but then he ate like a feast for dinner often.
Yeah, but I will say if Jason, like the thing is, like here in the backcountry, if you've got access to food, by all means, hammer it. Like he's
Hammer.
this is a funny story because like we were in Alaska on a mountain goat hunt, and we were packed in, and this guy that I know was up there too, and they got their mountain goat, and they were coming back out. Jason's like, "What you got in your pack?" You know, like he's always like trying to. He's like, oh, I'll help you lighten, and just took everybody's food, everybody's snacks, and just like sat down, just like eating double Mountain House. He's like, he's like, I'm gonna have so much energy, it doesn't even matter. Like we're going to town.
He has the fastest metabolism of anyone I know,
Like,
so that makes sense.
Burned off.
For sure. Well, and you know, for anybody that's listening, that might be kind of like, you know, you're hearing about this metabolic flexibility. We call it becoming superhuman, right? That's our low backhand, is like we create superhumans, because at the end of our 12-week program, we'll get people to do 24 or even 48-hour fasts. We have a client who's works with the military, former Marine, and he was out in the field for 48 hours and fasted the entire time. And he was like, I've never done that my entire time. And that's going through the process of 3 months prepping the body to become metabolically flexible. So the disclaimer here, guys, is exactly what Remi's saying, is that if you're hearing this and be like, oh, okay, so I should start all fast before my hunt, and then I'll just eat a bunch of protein and fat. If your body isn't metabolically flexible, you are screwing yourself. When I train for my ultra marathon, to run it in a fasted state or keto state, I trained that way for 5 months, and I was already metabolically flexible. So I put myself both through the physical, mental, and nutritional reps to get myself prepared. So I was the only person out of 500 people that I know of, maybe there was somebody else out there that was crazy like me, to go out there and do that, right? So it is a preparation, just like you would prep your body in the right workouts, or tune in your gun, get anything else prepared. Same thing with your nutrition. Emily, any other questions in terms of, you know, in this realm of metabolic flexibility for Remi specifically?
No, but I bet people are wondering, right? You'd mentioned the 14-day hunt versus a day hunt, right? Does that look any different for you in terms of what you pack with nutrition or set up your day?
It does, you know, and it's funny because I kind of, I was just talking about this, I think last week, but when I'm going into the backcountry, like you're at a calorie deficit. When I'm have the ability to bring more food, I actually do now, because those are longer days, and so I try not to like run at a deficit if I don't have to, because the thing is like you don't know, like you're on an elk hunt and maybe you hiked in and you're 20 miles of hiking and you get an elk at dark, and now you have the you have to take out what you've got. So now you've got a 120-pound backpack on your first trip, and you've got to go back the way that you came. Like you don't know when you need that. You go from like going hard to going really hard, and it ends. It's kind of like a professional racer. Like when you get close to the finish line, that's when you kick it up the fastest. It's like out of the gate you're going, and that last push to the finish line, that's when you burn it all out. And so you need you really do need to be prepared for that. And you want that to be a good experience, because most of the time, like if you're packing something out, you're done. You've had a long day, you've had a long week, you've had a long whatever. And now it's like, well, now I got to get this animal out of here. And it's a long night or a long whatever. And you might have to go back and do that same thing again tomorrow. So you can't be sore. You can't be burnt out. You can't be tired. You might be all those things, but you have to do it. And so you want to be prepared for that. So on my like day type stuff, I kind of take a different philosophy or a different approach, where that's where the flexibility comes in, because you don't know what's going to happen. And so there is that, like, you need to be able to access quick energy. You have, like, when we get something down, the first thing I do generally is I go into my, like, before I cut up, like, I'll just go in and I'll just eat stuff, because I know that I want that fuel ready for when I throw that heavy pack on and start climbing up that mountain, because I don't want to gas out when it's the most important. So being flexible like that is important too. And maybe that might even mean that you need to be flexible throughout the day of balancing what, I don't know, it's kind of a funny story, but balancing your food intake. You might have to not eat something to save it for later. I never walk out of there with no food. Like, I want to get to the trailhead or know within a certain portion when I can finish what I've got, because you just don't know how things are going to pan out. I always have like a reserve that's like, well, that might mean you have to skip something and you might have to jump back into burning something else. I was on a trip with a guy that was like a very fit guy, a lot of muscle, did a lot of lifting. That was his thing. And he was constantly eating, right? And I'm like, great for you. But the first thing that happened is he burnt out because he didn't have enough food. Well, he also decided to not really pay attention to rations and ate everyone's food. And so, like, luckily we killed something and we ate that. But I'm the kind of guy, like, I'm so into like the rationing and knowing, and I'm like, I'm barely eating and we're just grinding. And I'm like, man, I wish I had something to eat, but I'm fine. And I'm like, there's nothing left. Like, I was saving it for myself with that mental ration. Now we're out of food. So luckily we got an animal down, and it was all protein, which to your point, Joel, like, I know I work really well off protein, but I do like some kind of fat in there as well, or have some kind of something else. But at least we had something, and that, so then it's like, hey, I've got protein now. And my body's flexible enough to switch, like, okay, I can utilize this. We can work with this. We can, and that being flexible like that's really important, because so many people are so used to their structure and their thing. They get, like, something goes wrong like that. It's like, he wasn't prepared for that. And it really could have sucked for everyone else. Like,
Oh yeah.
He got scared and just started eating. We didn't know. And then we're like, where's the food? He's like, gone. What is it? I don't know.
And that's exactly, those are the type of people we're talking about, right? And that's most people, actually.
Yeah.
That if you get yourself in a situation, you don't want to be eating every 2 hours. One, it's going to take up time. It's going to take up spot or a place in weight in your backpack. And like you said, you need to have that mentality of like, hey, I need to ration this out. And so that's exactly what we're talking about. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah. I mean, it lines up with, and if you guys are listening right now, again, the habits are what matter. And you can hear in Remi's story of like, oh yeah, I used to not eat until later, or so on and so forth. That was the habit of Remi's body. So it has the ability, and Remi could just be naturally more metabolically flexible, right? Where he just didn't have to work as much as just genes are kind of in that position. Where other people, like your perfect example is the super muscular bodybuilder kind of guy, where the calorie intake is super high. It's most likely going to be highly processed foods, meaning that guy was probably doing peanut butter jelly sandwiches 6 times a day to be able to put in as many calories to grow as much muscle. But that much muscle in the bad country doesn't really serve you well. And when you're at 10% body fat or 8% body fat, you're the first one to go. Like, you actually, like you were talking about, Remi, you want to put on some body fat before you're going on a trip, and you want to be able to access it like that. And he wasn't able to do it. Add in the nervousness of like, I'm in the backcountry, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm with Remi, he's a gangster hunter and I'm not. Maybe I'm feeling insecure about this. just like how we get nervous and we start hammering down those cookies, folks. Okay. We started doing a little too much of that pie because you had a tough day and you're stressed out. That can happen out in the wilderness too. Yet it's a lot more detrimental when you're out in the wilderness. Because Remi, could you imagine carrying that dude out?
No.
That's just block of muscle.
It's like a Porsche without an engine. We kept calling him. Looks good,
Dude,
but
we're
doesn't do much.
Yeah, exactly. We're just going to leave you out here, buddy, doing this. You're all on your own here. But this is our exact point, you guys, in what we're talking about in terms of metabolic flexibility. I mean, you've touched so many different points in terms of your experience out in the field and how that matches up to actually really wanting to train to be able to become metabolically flexible. And so, Emily, I want to pass this on to you. If there's people listening, they've heard Remi's story, they've heard us talk about metabolic flexibility and being able to be flexible in the field, where you truly want to have your food as your super fuel, where just like Remi said, man, when it's time to get the big push, cool. Now I'm going to put jet fuel in, because when you're flexible, you already have fuel, but now you put in the appropriate carbohydrates and now you got super fuel. Now you have the ability to be able to push even harder. Where if you weren't metabolically flexible, you'd have to be like our Porsche guy who needed calories constantly. So, Emily, what's our recommendation to be able to create endurance nutrition out in the field?
Yeah. So this depends on the person, as I say often. Yet, and when I say that, I mean, how much body fat do you already have, right? Remi's already a lean person. So that's why it makes sense that he eats a lot more before his big or longer hunts. That's why he eats a lot more in the morning of a hunt it's a couple days perhaps. But if you have some extra fat stored on you already and you're like wanting to even lose weight, this might be a little bit easier for you so long as you train to be metabolically flexible. And that is implement fasting to some degree. That could be once a month. You do the 24-hour fast, or you wait to eat until noon or 3 p.m. like Remi used to do. That could be having your first meal be low or no carb, right? Because again, that's training your body. It's forcing your body to use fat for fuel. So meaning high fat, high protein, right? You could also do a couple days a week of a zone 2, right? Easy cardio in a fasted state. That's going to push your body to using fat for fuel as well, so long as we don't have the sugar with it. But my caveat there is do it with electrolytes. Do any of these with electrolytes. It's going to make it feel so much easier, right? When we say electrolytes, sodium, potassium, magnesium are the main ones. And so that could just be even salt, right? If you have good quality salt, put that in your water right before you do it. It's going to make for a lot much easier training, and even when you're out in the field too. So those are the 3 ways. Try some level of fasting, or try a low carb first meal, or try zone 2 cardio in a fasted state a couple times a week, and carry that into a couple of months. You're going to make really good progress.
And Emily, when we're talking about a high fat, high protein breakfast or first meal, what are the recommendations in terms of grams? And this is going to depend on the individual, but just to give people a kind of an idea, so they can kind of, if they've never locked in on a higher protein, higher fat diet, what would that look like?
Yeah, so it's going to look the same, pretty much the same for fat and protein. 30 to 50 grams is like the starting basic point. So 30 to 50 grams of fat and 30 to 50 grams of protein. Now, if you're not familiar with that, think ounces, right? At least 5 ounces of whatever meat or protein you're eating. So that's like 5 eggs or 5 ounces of meat for the protein. And for fat, think a couple ounces would be like the size of your thumb. So maybe double that, right? And so half an avocado would be great starting point. But oftentimes, which is why I love meat in general, or just high quality proteins, is they're paired with a fat, right? Salmon, eggs, beef. And it does get a little tougher when you get into things like elk and venison, right? They are naturally lower fat, but there's still fat in there that you could utilize. So you just may need to add a little extra if you're feeling that low energy.
Mm-hmm. And the electrolytes are huge too. I was introduced to electrolytes through you, Emily, right when I started to get into my intermittent fasting, and holy crap, did it make a huge difference. Remi, I know you take electrolytes as well. Did you feel the difference when you started adding that into your diet and into the backcountry?
Oh yeah, it's like I've talked about it before, but it's like my secret weapon of like I'll be on a
Yes.
Yes,
trip
same.
and back when I started guiding and doing this stuff, you got to realize like I think my normally like most seasons I'd go 123 consecutive days of just heavy pack hiking in the mountains. And it's like that was when I first started working and stuff. And to go that many days in a row, it was months on end. And it was like you really pretty much didn't take any rest days. And that was kind of my how I would just keep going because your body just really needs it, and people would be getting leg cramps and other things. I'd be like, "Ah, here, take a hit of this," and like, wow, that works. To be honest, you really I don't recommend it, but I kind of recommend it if you want to know how well electrolytes and I just call it like a drink supplement like that would works. Go to your max when you are completely gassed, like when your body actually really really needs it, and then drink it and you will feel the effects of it. Like it's pretty miraculous how you're like, oh, it works. It's like, yeah, you shouldn't get to that point. That's the goal is to not hit those far reaches. But
Hmm.
I mean, it just goes to show like it can completely change a lot of things. Your physical ability, and the other big thing is your mental capacity to keep going
Yeah.
because when you start to drain, your brain goes with your body too, and sometimes
Yeah.
your brain goes first. Your body could keep going, but your brain goes. And having those electrolytes where your body, like your brain's just feeling like everything's working good, um, it makes a big difference for what you're able to accomplish.
Yeah, 1,000%. I mean, when I did my ultra marathon, I lived off of electrolyte packets. I mean, it was just one after the other, after the other, after the other, and I didn't have the food, but I had the electrolytes, and it got me through. And I mean, you guys, if you aren't doing electrolytes, like, get on it. You can see it over, if you're on YouTube, you can see over Emily's shoulder. We use Element, but Remi, I think you use something else.
Product called Wilderness Athlete.
Well, yeah, I know Wilderness Athlete. Yeah, yeah. Whatever you guys are choosing to utilize and use it, you want to get it and you want to use it. I use it daily, 2 to 3 a day, majority of days. I start off with an Element packet and a scoop of MCT oil because it primes my body to be able to use fat. And so it helps me through my workouts. All of my workouts I do if fasted, whether it's zone 2 or bodybuilding or so on and so forth, CrossFit, doesn't matter. I do it in a fasted state, yet I always take that MCT oil. And that's really nice because it is light. It can pack in. It can give you some calories. It can tell your body like, oh, we're going to run off fat. Okay, cool. We'll run off fat for now until we utilize, carbs or anything else later on to be able to tactfully apply it to what we're doing in the backcountry, running, lifting, so on and so forth. So you heard it from all of us. If you're not on electrolytes, get on electrolytes. Get on electrolytes. Cool. Anything else, Remi, when it comes to nutrition? Has there been any times where you really effed it up and you felt yourself in a poor situation, or have you always kind of had that metabolic flexibility and that's given you kind of that leeway?
No, I mean I've always kind of had that. There are times where I've actually run like I'm just gonna keep going and run out of food. I don't suggest that, but and then there's been times where I've done like survival things and intentionally, not unintentionally, and you're out of food or whatever. But it's good to know how your body reacts to things. Some people get cranky, some people get angry. Being flexible
Mm-hmm.
though keeps you from getting those things, and even then you get that
Exactly.
hangry kind of thing. And I think there's not that many times where I try not to do that, try not to mess up, but also you do things long enough, you really understand your body and what it needs, and so it makes it easier when you're just getting started. It's kind of a little bit of a scary process, and you don't know like what do I do. And my suggestion is always kind of take what like go ahead and, I mean, most people like overtake stuff or not overtake, like overbring. and, but just like, it's a learning process, like write down, make notes of what worked, what didn't work, and build a system for you. And then the other thing that I think is really important is you don't gain benefit from food that you don't eat. And by that, I mean, you have to bring things that you like. You have to, you aren't going to drink your electrolytes if you don't like the way you get sick of certain things. Like when I was saying, I did very long stretches guiding and being out in the field. And, of course I'd be like coming back and other things, but it's like every day out there, there's certain food, like you take, back in the day, there was only a certain amount of food that you could take, like types of food. And I've been burnt out on every single bar out there. I have had more than should be legal. Like it took me, I think until probably last year, it took me about 15 years to eat another Cliff Bar because I had had so many Cliff Bars. Like whenever they came out, I was like, okay, this is what every camp that I'm working in has. This is what we're eating. Like I just couldn't even smell them anymore. And it's like that happens with everything. So you really have to find foods that, like, if you're like, hey, this is something that's a little bit heavier, but I like it, eat it. And maybe don't eat too much of it because you'll burn out. Like if it's a dehydrated meal, I did that before too. Like there's a certain one that I like that has a lot of calories. It's like, I just ate it for 5 days in a row. Next week, you don't really want to take it. So being flexible with your food, and it's hard when you're packing stuff, but bring things that you like, because it can be hard to choke down food sometimes too. That's the thing, when you are metabolically flexible, sometimes ingesting new calories when you're in the throes of being physically active, is actually difficult. Your stomach kind of shrinks itself. You don't really feel hungry. And if it tastes, it's like, I'm not a big fan of, if you aren't a big fan of cashews, well, they're good for you, but if you just don't want to eat them, like I'd bring like certain like nuts because they were good. And I just would come back every trip and be like, oh, there's a lot of nuts left in here that I didn't eat, because I just got sick of them. So I switched it up. And then next time, 2 weeks later, I'd take something different, I'd take those ones again. And once I liked them again, then you eat them and it just makes it a lot easier. So just having foods that you like and will eat is important as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Something I want to follow.
I didn't think about that at all. Yet that makes a lot of sense. Too many Cliff Bars can make you want to throw up.
Right. Or it's like, hey, you love almonds? Talk to me on day 13. You know what I mean? How many almonds you eating today, bud? It's like you've got to really think about that, because it gets difficult to, like, I can't choke down another almond. It's just like, all right.
Just looking at almonds makes you want to throw up. You're just like, no,
you're like more. Trying to trade a squirrel for something else. You're like, come on, man. I know you got something.
What do you got, man?
Yeah.
Anything? You're starting to look at the bark of a tree like, I don't know. I think that's going to taste a little bit better.
Exactly.
Maybe I'll chew on that for a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's awesome. Well, I want to shift here just for a second before we wrap this up. And you guys, if you're interested in metabolic flexibility, we do have a PDF that we're more than willing to share with you to get you started on metabolic flexibility. All you have to do is reach out to Emily at proclivity.co. She'll send over that PDF. So if it's something you're interested in, you want to actually tie this in before your hunt, we would suggest starting to do this 3 months beforehand and starting to get this practice in, so that you do have the ability to have that adjustment to give yourself more endurance in the backcountry. So if that's something you guys are interested, feel free to reach out. If they have questions for you, Remi, can they get in contact with you?
Yeah, social media is the easiest way.
Gotcha.
At Remi Warren, pretty much on all major platforms. Sometimes it's hard because the inbox gets pretty full and I don't see everything. I try to get to it when I get some free time. I definitely reach out and do messages and other things like that. So
yeah. And you guys, just as a heads up, as you heard, he was out in the backcountry for 6 months or whatever it was. So you don't have reception out there, guys. So
he's living the thing.
He's living the thing. Trust us, like, it's a struggle for us too. We're not huge social media, people as well. We like, the face-to-face interactions and that kind of stuff. But Day and age of our time. Speaking of social media, we got some questions. We have 3 questions. We're going to wrap this up that people had for you when they knew, like, oh, it's Remi. I know Remi. And I'm going to ask my first question, because this is actually something that's really curious for me. And I was talking to my brother about it this morning, is the emotion of the harvest. See, I've never killed a big animal before. And it's truly, there's this fear of, like, man, taking a life, uh, I've done upland before, and you know, even taking a life there, there's this kind of like emotional feeling of, like, oh man, what was it like for you for the first time when, and I'm sure you were really young, what was the feeling of taking a life for the first time?
Yeah, I think for me, I think everybody's a little bit different, right?
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that I've noticed, even from people that are maybe a little unsure, obviously you have like this respect for the animal, and it is a very serious thing. But you also have this, in kind of a strange way, a sense of excitement. And maybe it's because of the success, maybe it's because of something in our DNA that says, like, it like taps into that portion of, like, you, when you had to do this to survive, you don't think you would be excited that now your family gets to eat, now that you get to eat, now that you
Mm-hmm.
get to live. It's a very exciting feeling. And there's something primal about that feeling. It's not a feeling that is, I would say it's not a feeling that's in other things. You just don't get the same feeling. It's a very unique feeling.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, it's a weird thing in our brain where, like, it's a beautiful animal, and I think that, you feel in some sense, or a sense of remorse. But as you start to turn that animal into food, like this thing in your body, it starts to go, like, this is it feels very it kind of almost feels natural in a way of, like, oh, okay. Like, you in a it's a different feeling because there's a rush of adrenaline. There's,
Yeah.
most of the time, to be like successful too, your body kind of, there's like a, almost like a, in the anticipation of the moment, but kind of like this rush of adrenaline and then that letdown of adrenaline. So it's a very interesting emotional mixture that I think can be very difficult to understand, and everybody's a little bit different, or maybe other people have heightened things within that kind of cocktail of emotion, I guess. I think my wife, like, first time she took a deer, it was like she was crying, but also, like, extremely excited. Like, she was like, I've never felt this. I don't know what it is, but I don't dislike it. Like, it was just like a, okay. And I think that's the other thing too. Like, it's not for everyone. There's certain people that, like, it just, there's an emotional, and maybe it just doesn't click. That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that for most people, it is kind of this interesting emotion that you don't really get other places. I think that that's kind of part of it, because there is this very high value of respect on the animal you've taken. For one reason, like, it was probably a struggle to even get to that point. You're like, for you,
Mm-hmm.
it's like you can't even draw tags, so it's like I can't even go hunting if I want to. So I
I
finally get the
know.
opportunity. You're like, I want to make good on this opportunity, and then you try really, really hard to make good on that. So there's a lot of emotion invested into it in many different
Yeah.
ways. So I don't know. I think it's like a very personal thing, and it can be hard to kind of explain, but it is kind of a cocktail of different things. And some of those things are like, wow, that was a very primal event that I didn't really know
Mm-hmm.
I had in me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, I'm looking forward to it. Emily, I know you had some questions as well. What are the
Yeah.
other questions that we have?
We'll just do one more.
Okay.
I thought of this, and someone else asked this as well. Might be a little random. What do you do to help your wife prepare for the hunt when you're gone and she's not going? How
That's
do
a
you,
good
when
question.
someone who asked me, like, how do you keep your wife happy?
Yeah. That's a good question. I mean, I think that comes back to a lot of things. I try to be extremely present when I am home, before I'm not just before I'm gone, but in so many things. I think a lot of people, and I see it. It's easy to fall into the trap, but, like, when you're home and you're with your family, it's like easy to not even escape, but just to not be present. You can be on your phone, you can be doing the other things, but to be very present in paying attention and doing things with them. Like I put a lot of energy into what I do when I'm away, and I put just as much energy into when I'm home. And I think it comes back to that like conscious choice of what you're doing. And sometimes it's not easy. Like as my wife, like being a mom is hard, being a dad is hard, but like being a present mom and being a present dad and really like valuing your time together and doing things and not just letting it float by goes a long way, you know. And I've talked to other people about this and they ask it and when I point that out, they're like, yeah, I probably could do more of that. Right. And it doesn't mean that it's easy, but it is more fulfilling for sure. Because the other stuff that you're distracted by, like you said, you know, like we're in a busy society that doesn't put value on those things. And like, man, I don't know, build a relationship with your family and do those things. Like that's the most important thing. And then when I'm out there, you know, it's not easy. I don't think it's easy for my wife to when I'm gone. But also, you know, it is our life too. And like other people deal with that with other things. It might not be hunting. For me, it's different because it's like I'm going to work. For some people, it's like, oh, you're just going out to have fun. And I'm working and still having fun. I think that's the hardest part. It's like, I was like with the kids all the day and you're in Greenland, like chasing caribou and like looking at glaciers. And I'm like, I know, I'm sorry. But, you know, I think that's like being very supportive of that. And it's something that you know, constantly try to improve on. It's just like anything. You really have to put intention behind what you're doing. And so intention before I'm gone and intention when I get home. And, you know, to the point of being prepared for things and be prepared for your hunt, be prepared for all those things, get yourself in good physical shape, get your nutrition dialed. So when you do come back, you aren't so gassed that you can't even be present, you know, when you come home. How many people go on a week-long trip and are dead for 10 more days afterwards? And that's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Just preparing yourself in all those ways for not just the trip itself, but everything that follows.
Perfect. That's exactly the perfect answer. Thank you.
Look at that. Remi, man, really, really appreciate you taking your time. I know that your time is, you know, very important, and it's important to us that you took the time to be able to be on our show. So we want to say thank you, and we're very grateful to be able to have you. The knowledge that you gave out to us today and to our listeners was, again, we really appreciate Remi for coming on. And you guys, that is a wrap for episode 107. We appreciate you guys coming and listening to us today. As always, feel free to leave a review and to be able to share our podcast. We love being able to get our information out. That's it. Until next time, Emily, you know what it is.
Best day ever.
Best day ever. See you guys.